The mail-order bride arrived a day too late, but the cowboy said, "You're right on time for me." The crack of a rifle split the night air. Jackson Hayes dropped to his knee, Winchester at the ready, eyes scanning the darkness surrounding Silver Creek Mine. The second shot kicked up dirt 3 feet to his left. "Get down!" he bellowed to the miners scrambling around the collapsed tunnel entrance. "We've got company!" A third shot ricocheted off mining equipment as Jackson took aim at a flash of movement on the ridge. He squeezed the trigger once, twice. A pained yell confirmed his marksmanship. "That'll give us some breathing room," he muttered. But there was no time to pursue the shooter. 3 good men were buried under tons of rock and timber, and every second counted. The foreman, Frank Sullivan, appeared at his side, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "It's bad, Jackson, real bad. The new tunnel's completely caved in. Tom and the Miller boys are trapped." Jackson grabbed a lantern and examined the tunnel entrance, a mess of splintered wood and fallen rock. His experienced eye caught what others might miss. He ran his hand along a jagged edge of a support beam. "This wasn't no accident," he growled, showing Frank the clean, diagonal cut halfway through the timber. "Someone sabotaged these supports." Frank's eyes widened. "Who would—" "Later," Jackson cut him off, his voice like steel. "If I find who did this, they won't live long enough to see the inside of a jail cell. Right now, we save our men." As he plunged into what remained of the tunnel, one thought burned in his mind. Someone had tried to destroy everything he'd built, and they'd pay dearly for it. 48 hours earlier, the stagecoach rattled into Silver Creek under a sky-threatening snow. Eleanor Wright clutched her small traveling case, knuckles white with tension. She'd traveled over 2,000 miles from Boston, her nerves frayed to breaking, constantly looking over her shoulder. The locket around her neck felt heavy, not with gold, but with the damning evidence inside. Through the dusty window, she caught her first glimpse of the town. A single main street lined with wooden buildings, the mountains looming behind like silent guardians. This remote Colorado mining settlement would be her sanctuary, or so she prayed. As the coach lurched to a stop, Eleanor adjusted her plain gray traveling dress and tucked a stray strand of auburn hair back into her practical bun. 26 years old and starting life over with nothing but a handful of dollars, a loaded Colt Navy revolver hidden in her skirts, and a desperate plan. "Silver Creek, end of the line," the driver called. Eleanor descended carefully, scanning the small crowd at the station. She was looking for a man she knew only from a photograph and a handful of letters. Nathan Cooper, rancher, her husband-to-be through a mail-order arrangement. He was to meet her at 2 o'clock. The station master approached, a silver-haired man with kind eyes that suddenly turned sympathetic when she introduced herself. "Miss Wright, the mail-order bride for Nathan Cooper?" he asked, removing his hat. "Yes," Eleanor replied, her stomach tightening at his expression. "Is Mr. Cooper delayed?" The old man twisted his hat in his hands. "I'm awful sorry to be the one to tell you this, Miss Wright, but Nathan Cooper is dead. Mining accident 2 days ago. Tunnel collapse at the Silver Creek Mine." The world tilted beneath Eleanor's feet. Her carefully laid plans, her escape route, her future, all collapsed like the tunnel that had claimed Nathan Cooper's life. I see," she managed, though she saw nothing but disaster. Her money would last perhaps 2 weeks. She knew no one in Silver Creek, and somewhere back east, Maxwell Blackwood was searching for her, and the evidence that would send him to the gallows. "Miss Wright?" A deep voice cut through her panic. She turned to find herself facing a tall man with broad shoulders and eyes the color of a winter sky. His dark hair was brushed back from a face weathered by sun and hardship, a neatly trimmed beard framing a strong jaw. A gun belt hung comfortably around his hips, the worn grip of a Colt Peacemaker suggesting it was more than decoration. I'm Jackson Hayes. Nathan was my friend. His voice carried the rough edge of the frontier, but held genuine concern. I heard about your arrival. I'm sorry about Nathan. Eleanor studied him warily. Trust had become a luxury she could ill afford. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, though it seems I've traveled a very long way for nothing. Where will you go now? He asked, his direct gaze unsettling in its intensity. The question hung in the air between them. Eleanor had no answer to give. I don't know, she admitted finally. I hadn't considered alternatives. Jackson nodded, decision made. My sister Sarah runs a boarding house in town. Clean, respectable place. Let me take you there while you figure things out. Eleanor hesitated, weighing her limited options. Stay with a stranger or sleep on the station bench? The choice, while uncomfortable, was clear. That's very kind, Mr. Hayes, she said, picking up her case. Nothing kind about it, he replied, taking the bag from her hands. Just basic decency. Out here, that's sometimes all that stands between survival and the alternative. As they walked to his wagon, Eleanor felt the weight of eyes following them. Silver Creek wasn't large enough for a new arrival to go unnoticed, especially one meant to be a bride for a man now dead. Don't mind them, Jackson said quietly. Small town. Not much entertainment except other folks' business. The boarding house turned out to be a two-story wooden structure at the quiet end of the main street. As they approached, a woman emerged from the front door, tall like her brother with the same striking blue eyes, but her face softened by warmth and humor. Jackson, I was wondering when you'd... She stopped when she spotted Eleanor, understanding dawning immediately. Oh, you must be Nathan's bride. Eleanor Wright, she introduced herself, straightening her shoulders against the weight of pity in the woman's eyes. Sarah Hayes, Jackson's sister replied. Come in, please. You look half frozen and fully exhausted. Inside, the boarding house was plain but immaculately clean. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Eleanor felt tears threatening, simple comforts she hadn't experienced in weeks of constant flight. Nathan was a good man, Sarah said as she poured coffee. Everyone respected him. His death has hit this town hard, especially Jackson. They served together in the war, 7th Cavalry at Gettysburg. Jackson was a captain, finest sharpshooter in the regiment. Nathan saved his life twice. Eleanor glanced at Jackson, who stood by the window, seemingly focused on something outside. The set of his shoulders spoke of a man carrying burdens heavier than most. I didn't know him, Eleanor admitted. Just his letters. What will you do now? Sarah asked. The question everyone kept asking, and still Eleanor had no answer. Her silence spoke volumes. You'll stay here tonight, Sarah declared. Tomorrow is soon enough to make decisions. After a simple but hearty meal, Sarah showed Eleanor to a small, clean room. Alone at last, Eleanor sank onto the narrow bed and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. She removed the locket from around her neck and clicked it open. Inside wasn't a photograph, but a tightly folded piece of paper, columns of numbers and dates in her precise handwriting, documenting years of embezzlement from the Workers' Safety Fund at Blackwood Textiles. For 3 years, she'd worked as a senior accountant, discovering the pattern of theft only by accident. When she'd discreetly gathered more evidence, she found that Maxwell Blackwood had diverted thousands meant for fire safety equipment. The resulting factory fire had killed 12 people, including her sister Clara, when flames trapped workers behind locked exit doors with no fire escapes. She'd confronted Blackwood privately with her findings, believing naively that he might make amends. Instead, he'd threatened her life. That night, she'd fled with the evidence that could destroy him, the evidence Maxwell Blackwood would kill to recover. What now? She whispered to the empty room. What now? The next morning, Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through faded curtains. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. Then reality crashed back. She was in Silver Creek, Colorado, her planned marriage impossible, her future uncertain. She dressed quickly in her second dress, navy blue, as plain and serviceable as the gray one. After arranging her hair in its usual no-nonsense style, she descended to find Sarah preparing breakfast for several male boarders who tipped their hats respectfully as Eleanor entered. "Sleep well?" Sarah asked, setting a plate of eggs and bacon before her. "Better than expected," Eleanor admitted, the first unbroken sleep she'd had since fleeing Boston. "Jackson's coming by this morning," Sarah mentioned casually. "Said he had a proposition for you." Eleanor nearly choked on her coffee. "A proposition?" Sarah laughed at her expression. "A business proposition. My brother is many things, but improper isn't one of them." When Jackson arrived an hour later, he was dressed for work: sturdy canvas pants, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest that had seen better days. His hat bore the dust of the mines, and his face carried the gravity of a man who'd recently lost both a friend and workers. "Miss Wright," he nodded, "I was wondering if you'd ride out to Nathan's place with me. Thought you might want to see what he'd built." The offer surprised her, but curiosity won out. "I'd like that," she said. Nathan Cooper's ranch lay 3 miles outside town, a modest house and barn surrounded by grazing land. As Jackson helped Eleanor from the wagon, she tried to imagine the life she might have led here. "He built most of it himself," Jackson explained as they approached the house. "Took him 4 years, was real proud of it." Inside, the house was simple but solid. 2 bedrooms, a living area, and a kitchen. Everything neat and orderly. On the dresser in what would have been her room, Eleanor found a small vase, empty but clearly chosen with care. "He was getting ready for you," Jackson said quietly from the doorway. The reality of what she'd lost, not Nathan himself, whom she'd never known, but the safety and new beginning he'd represented, struck Eleanor with unexpected force. "I was late," she whispered. "If the train hadn't been delayed—" "Don't," Jackson interrupted firmly. Nathan went into that mine knowing one of the support beams needed replacing. He was impatient, wanted to check a new silver vein they'd found. "What happened wasn't your fault." He led her outside to a bench Nathan had built beneath an oak tree. "Said he wanted you to have a place to watch the sunset," Jackson explained. They sat in silence for a long moment, the vast Colorado sky stretching endlessly above them. "Miss Wright," Jackson finally said, "I understand you worked as an accountant back east?" Eleanor tensed. How much did he know about her past? "Yes, for a textile mill." "I own the Silver Creek mine," he continued. "Have for 6 years now. Lost my business partner last spring. Cave-in, same as Nathan. Since then, I've been trying to manage both the mining operations and the books." He grimaced. "I'm not much good with numbers." Eleanor studied him carefully. "Are you offering me employment, Mr. Hayes?" $15 a week to start," he said directly. "You'd manage the accounts, correspondence, payroll. I've got an office at the mine that doesn't get much use these days. It'd be yours." The amount was generous, more than she'd earned at Blackwood's. Enough to build savings, perhaps eventually move further west if necessary. "Why me?" she asked. "You know nothing about me." Jackson's weathered face softened slightly. "I know Nathan chose you, and he was an excellent judge of character. That tells me something worth knowing. It was a risk, becoming visible in an official position rather than lying low. But the alternative was worse. No money, no purpose, nowhere to go." "I accept," Eleanor said. "On a trial basis, 1 month." Jackson's handshake was firm, his calloused hand engulfing hers. 1 month, he agreed. As they drove back to town, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just jumped from one precipice to another. But for the first time since fleeing Boston, she felt something like hope stirring in her chest. Eleanor's first day at the Silver Creek mine revealed the magnitude of the task before her. Jackson's office was a disaster, papers piled haphazardly on every surface, ledgers stuffed with loose invoices, correspondence from the Denver assay office unopened. "I warned you," Jackson said, taking in her expression. "You did," Eleanor agreed, already mentally organizing the chaos. "I'll need proper ledger books, ink, pens, and filing boxes." "Whatever you need," he nodded. "I'll have them brought from Denver on tomorrow's stage." By midday, Eleanor had created some semblance of order, focusing on the payroll records. As she worked, she discovered concerning patterns in the books, missing shipment records, discrepancies between the mine's production and reported sales, and curious payments to unnamed consultants. "Mr. Hayes," she called when Jackson stopped by to check on her progress. "I found some irregularities in these accounts." Jackson frowned, leaning over her shoulder to examine the ledger. His proximity sent an unexpected warmth through her, which she promptly dismissed. "These consultant payments," she pointed, "all made to the same account at First Territorial Bank. Do you know who they're for?" "Never authorized any consultants," Jackson said, his frown deepening. "And these silver shipment numbers, they're off by at least 20% from what we've actually pulled from the mine." "Someone's been skimming from your operation," Eleanor concluded. Before Jackson could respond, the door swung open, revealing a woman, tall, blonde, and impeccably dressed in a fashionable traveling suit that must have cost more than Eleanor earned in 3 months at Blackwood's. "I beg your pardon," the woman said, her accent marking her as Eastern, perhaps New York. "I'm looking for Mr. Hayes." "Miss Harrington." Jackson straightened, his tone cooling noticeably. "What brings you to Silver Creek Mine?" "Uncle William sent me," she replied, her gaze drifting dismissively over Eleanor before returning to Jackson. "I'm Victoria Harrington. My uncle is Judge William Harrington of the Territorial Court. We're considering an investment in Silver Creek Mine." Alarm bells rang in Eleanor's mind. According to the snippets of conversation she'd heard over breakfast, Judge Harrington was reputed to be the most powerful man in the county and, according to Sarah, not known for his ethical business dealings. "Your uncle's interest in my mine is news to me," Jackson said evenly, "especially since I've never considered selling any part of it." "Times change, Mr. Hayes," Victoria smiled, trailing her gloved fingers over the desk. "Though I must say, if the mine's financial affairs are as chaotic as this office appears, perhaps we should reconsider our offer." "There's no offer to reconsider, Miss Harrington," Jackson replied. "The mine isn't for sale." "Everyone has a price, Mr. Hayes." Victoria's smile remained fixed. "Uncle William would like to discuss this further. We're hosting a small dinner tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. We'd be delighted if you'd join us." Her eyes flicked to Eleanor. "Both of you, of course." After she'd departed, Eleanor turned to Jackson. "What was that about?" "Nothing good," he replied grimly. "The Harringtons don't make social calls without a purpose. And if they're suddenly interested in Silver Creek Mine, I need to know why." That afternoon, Jackson insisted on taking Eleanor to the shooting range behind the livery stable. "If you're going to work at my mine," he explained, "you need to know how to handle a gun. Not everyone around here respects a woman alone." Eleanor hesitated, then revealed her Colt Navy. "I'm not entirely defenseless, Mr. Hayes." Jackson's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Where'd you learn to shoot?" "My father taught me," she said. It wasn't entirely a lie. Her father had taught her the basics years ago, though she'd never had cause to use those skills until now. "Show me," Jackson challenged, setting up tin cans on a fence post. Eleanor took aim and fired, missing the first can by several inches. Jackson stepped closer, adjusting her stance. "Breathe out as you squeeze the trigger," he instructed, his hands steady on her shoulders. "Not when you pull. Smooth and steady." She tried again, this time knocking the can from its perch. "Better," he nodded. "Now watch." Jackson drew his peacemaker and fired 6 shots in rapid succession, hitting 6 cans without apparent effort. The display of marksmanship was impressive. That's what we're aiming for, he said, reloading with practiced efficiency. One shot might save your life. 6 shots will end most troubles before they properly begin. They practiced until Eleanor could hit her target consistently. By the time they headed back to town, her arms ached, but she felt a new confidence in her ability to protect herself. That night at the boarding house, Sarah confirmed Jackson's suspicions about the Harringtons. They own half the county, the bank, the mercantile, most of the good grazing land north of town. If the judge wants something, he generally gets it. And Victoria? Eleanor asked, remembering the woman's predatory smile. Been trying to sink her claws into Jackson since she arrived from New York 6 months ago, Sarah replied bluntly. Be careful around her, Eleanor. The Harringtons aren't people you want as enemies. The next evening found Eleanor dressed in her best, which wasn't saying much. Sarah had helped her freshen the navy dress with a bit of lace at the collar, but it remained woefully plain compared to the finery she'd glimpsed at the Harrington estate as Jackson helped her from the wagon. Remember, Jackson murmured as they approached the imposing house, we're just here to find out what they're after. Don't volunteer any information about yourself that you don't have to. The dinner that followed was an exercise in discomfort. Eleanor was seated far from Jackson, who was placed beside Victoria. Judge Harrington, a silver-haired man with cold eyes and an air of absolute authority, dominated the conversation, steering it inevitably toward Eleanor's past. Miss Wright, he called down the table during dessert. Victoria tells me you worked for Blackwood Textiles in Boston, a fine establishment. I've met Maxwell Blackwood on several occasions during my visits east. A shrewd businessman. Eleanor's heart stuttered. How could he know? She'd never mentioned the name of the mill to anyone in Silver Creek. He is certainly shrewd, she agreed neutrally. I understand there was some trouble at the mill shortly before you left Boston, the judge continued, his tone conversational but his eyes sharp. A fire, I believe. Quite tragic. Several lives lost. The dining room seemed to close in around her. Every eye at the table was fixed on her face, watching for her reaction. Yes, she managed, fighting to keep her voice steady. It was a terrible tragedy. Such incidents often reveal character, Judge Harrington observed. Some rise to the occasion, while others flee from responsibility. The implication hung in the air, clear as crystal. Somehow Judge Harrington had received information about her from Boston, but how much did he know? I find the tragedy often reveals the true character of all involved. Eleanor replied, meeting his gaze directly. Those who cause harm, those who suffer it, and those who witness it without acting. A hush fell over the table. Judge Harrington's eyes narrowed slightly, but his thin smile remained fixed. Indeed, Miss Wright, a most philosophical perspective. Later, as the ladies withdrew to the parlor while the men remained for cigars and brandy, Victoria cornered Eleanor. A word of friendly advice, she murmured, her voice pitched low. My uncle has connections throughout the country, including Boston. If there's anything in your past you prefer to keep private, you might want to reconsider your position at Silver Creek. Small towns have such active imaginations, and reputations are so easily damaged. The threat was barely veiled. Eleanor felt cold anger replace her earlier anxiety. Are you suggesting I should leave my position? Not at all, Victoria replied with manufactured innocence. Merely pointing out that sometimes a fresh start requires a truly fresh beginning. Silver Creek is a small pond, but Denver is growing rapidly. A woman with your skills might find more anonymity in a larger city. I appreciate your concern, Eleanor said coolly, but I'm quite content with my position at Silver Creek. Victoria's smile tightened. As you wish. I only thought to spare you potential embarrassment. Uncle William can be quite persistent when his interest is piqued, and he finds your sudden departure from Boston most intriguing. On the ride back to town, Eleanor finally revealed her full story to Jackson. the embezzlement she discovered at Blackwood Textiles, her confrontation with Maxwell, her sister's death in the resulting fire, her flight west with the evidence that could hang Maxwell Blackwood. Judge Harrington knows, she concluded, or at least suspects. The question is, how? And what does he intend to do with that information? Jackson's face was grim in the moonlight. I don't know, but at dinner, he offered me $50,000 for 49% of Silver Creek Mine. That's far more than it's worth, Eleanor gasped. Exactly. And it comes with conditions, including who works there. His meaning was clear. I refused. Eleanor's heart sank. I'm putting you in danger. Perhaps I should. No, Jackson interrupted firmly, his hand closing over hers. You're not going anywhere because of Harrington's veiled threats. Whatever game he's playing, we'll face it together. The conviction in his voice warmed something in Eleanor's chest that had been cold for too long. For the first time since her father and sister died, she felt less alone. Why? She asked softly. Why risk your business, perhaps even your safety, for someone you barely know? Jackson was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had softened. Because I know enough, Eleanor. I know you're brave and principled. I know you traveled 2,000 miles alone to build a new life. I know you've brought order to my mind, and he hesitated, then finished quietly, and light back into my life when I thought it would always be in shadow. The words hung in the night air between them, more intimate than any declaration. Eleanor felt her heart beating rapidly, aware of his hand still covering hers, of how close they sat on the wagon seat. The distant sound of hoofbeats interrupted whatever she might have said, both tense, listening as the sound grew louder, a single rider approaching rapidly from the direction of town. Jackson reached beneath the seat and withdrew his Winchester rifle. He held it ready, but not aimed as the rider came into view, a young miner on a lathered horse who pulled up sharply when he spotted their wagon. "Mr. Hayes," the rider called, breathless. "Thank God I found you." "There's been an accident at the mine. Cave-in at the new tunnel. 3 men trapped, including Frank." Jackson was already turning the wagon, his movements swift and precise. "How bad?" "Bad enough. The support beams gave way. The men inside were calling out, so they're alive. But no one's sure how long the rest will hold." "I'm coming," Jackson said, then glanced at Eleanor. "I'll take you to the boarding house first." "No," she interrupted firmly. "Take me to the mine. I can help organize the rescue efforts, tend to the injured. There's no time to waste." Jackson hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Hold tight." As they raced toward the mine, the rider called over the noise of hooves and wheels. "Mr. Hayes, there's something else. Judge Harrington was at the mine when it happened. Him and some other men were inspecting the new tunnel." Jackson and Eleanor exchanged a troubled glance. What had Judge Harrington been doing at Silver Creek so late in the evening, hours after they'd left his dinner party? The crack of that first rifle shot changed everything. As Jackson dropped to his knee and returned fire, Eleanor realized this was no accident. It was attempted murder. The mine was a scene of controlled chaos when they arrived, men moving purposefully around the entrance, carrying timber, tools, and buckets. Several wagons were parked nearby, including an elegant black one that belonged to Judge Harrington. While Jackson organized the rescue efforts, Eleanor spotted a figure slipping away from the mine office, a man she recognized from the Harrington estate. Acting on instinct, she followed, keeping to the shadows. Through the office window, she saw him rifling through her desk, pocketing papers from the drawer where she'd stored her notes on the financial discrepancies. "Looking for something?" she asked coldly. Stepping into the doorway, her Colt Navy leveled at his chest. The man froze, then lunged for his own weapon. Eleanor fired once, the bullet grazing his shoulder. He yelped and stumbled back. "Next one goes through your heart," she warned, her hand steady. "Who sent you?" "You won't shoot me," he sneered. "You don't have the—" She fired again, this time sending his hat flying. "Try me." The man paled. "Harrington sent me. Said to find anything that might connect him to Blackwood. He didn't say nothing about getting shot." "What's Harrington's connection to Blackwood?" Eleanor demanded. "Partners. Mining investments back east. Blackwood wired the judge 2 weeks ago. Said a woman had stolen evidence that could ruin them both. Offered $10,000 to find you." A commotion outside indicated the rescue efforts were progressing. "Turn around," Eleanor ordered. "Hands behind your back." She bound his wrist with cord from the desk and marched him outside just as Jackson emerged from the tunnel, filthy and exhausted, but triumphant. The trapped miners had been rescued. "Found this one going through my office," Eleanor explained, pushing her captive forward. "Says Harrington and Blackwood are partners, and that Harrington sabotaged the mine." Jackson's expression darkened dangerously. "Is that so?" He stepped toward the bound man, who shrank back. "It wasn't supposed to hurt nobody," the man babbled. "Just scare you into selling. The judge said we just damaged some equipment. He didn't say nothing about causing a cave-in or shooting at folks." Jackson's fist connected with the man's jaw, dropping him to the ground. "You nearly killed 3 of my men," he growled. Eleanor spotted Judge Harrington watching from the edge of the clearing, his face pale in the lamplight. When their eyes met, he turned and hurried to his waiting carriage. "He's getting away," Eleanor said. "Not for long," Jackson promised grimly. 3 days later, a telegram arrived for Eleanor at the boarding house. "Miss Wright, stop request meeting at your convenience. Stop matters of mutual interest to discuss. Stop Judge Harrington." "He's not wasting time," Jackson observed, reading over her shoulder. They arranged to meet Judge Harrington at his office that afternoon. As they walked down Silver Creek's main street, Jackson's hand found Eleanor's, his grip warm and reassuring. "Whatever happens in there," he said quietly, "remember what I told you. We face this together." Jackson had spent the intervening days gathering evidence. The captured saboteur had signed a sworn statement. Jackson had also discovered that the consultants in the mine's books were actually payments to Judge Harrington, bribes to secure favorable rulings in mining disputes. Judge Harrington received them in a wood-paneled office filled with leather-bound law books and hunting trophies. Victoria stood at his shoulder like a perfectly groomed sentinel. "Miss Wright, Mr. Hayes," the judge greeted them without rising. "Please be seated." "I prefer to stand," Jackson replied evenly. "What's this about?" "Harrington?" The judge opened a drawer and withdrew a folder. "Miss Wright, I believe these documents will interest you." Inside were newspaper clippings about the Blackwood Mill fire, and Eleanor's blood froze, a copy of a telegram from Maxwell Blackwood offering a substantial reward for information leading to her capture. "I have connections in Boston," Judge Harrington explained. "When Victoria mentioned meeting a Miss Wright from Blackwood Textiles, I was intrigued. Maxwell Blackwood is an old associate. We've had business dealings over the years." "What do you want?" Eleanor asked, tired of the posturing. "2 things," the judge replied. "First, I want the evidence you have against Maxwell Blackwood, all of it. And second," he paused, "you both leave Silver Creek. I'll buy the mine at a fair price, say $30,000. You can start fresh somewhere else, perhaps California. And if we refuse," Jackson's voice was dangerously quiet, "then I send word to Maxwell Blackwood that his fugitive accountant is in Silver Creek." Judge Harrington smiled coldly. "I imagine he'll be quite eager to retrieve both Miss Wright and his missing ledgers." "You're blackmailing us," Eleanor stated flatly. "I prefer to think of it as negotiation," the judge replied. "You have until tomorrow to decide." Jackson stepped forward, dropping a thick envelope on the desk. "Actually, we've already decided. Inside, you'll find a sworn statement from your hired saboteur, detailing how you ordered him to damage my mine, plus records of every bribe you've taken from mining operations across the territory." The judge's face blanched. "You're bluffing." The Denver Tribune doesn't think so, Eleanor added. They've already received copies of everything. They're quite interested in running the story. Victoria gasped. Uncle William? Be quiet, the judge snapped. His cold composure cracked, revealing naked fear beneath. Hayes, this doesn't have to end badly. We can come to an arrangement. The arrangement, Jackson interrupted, is this. You resign your position immediately and leave Colorado territory. Your niece goes with you. You never contact Maxwell Blackwood about Eleanor. And in return, we don't have you arrested for attempted murder. You can't prove 3 men almost died in that cave-in, Jackson said, his voice deadly calm. In mining country, that's enough to see you lynched, judge or not. I'm offering you a chance to leave with your neck intact. I suggest you take it. Judge Harrington stared at them, calculation and fury warring in his eyes. Finally, he gave a stiff nod. I'll need 3 days to arrange my affairs. You have 2, Jackson replied. And if I see any of your men near my mine or Eleanor in that time, all deals are off. Outside in the crisp autumn air, Eleanor drew a shaking breath. Do you think he'll keep his word? No, Jackson said grimly. But he knows we have him cornered. His reputation is everything to him. He won't risk a public scandal. Still, we'll need to be careful until he's gone. That night, unable to sleep, Eleanor sat by her window watching the stars. For so long, she'd carried the evidence as both burden and shield, her only protection against Blackwood's reach. A soft knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Jackson standing there. I saw your light, he said simply. May I come in? For a moment, they stood in silence, the lamplight casting their shadows against the wall. Whatever happens tomorrow, Jackson said at last, I want you to know something. He took her hands in his, his blue eyes intent on hers. I love you, Eleanor Wright. I didn't expect to, didn't plan to, but there it is. If we have to leave Silver Creek, start over somewhere else, I want to do it together. I love you too, she whispered. And yes, together. He kissed her then, a kiss that spoke of promises and possibilities, of futures not yet written, but longed for all the same. Morning brought confirmation that Judge Harrington was indeed making arrangements to leave. The local banker reported the judge had liquidated substantial holdings. Victoria was seen packing trunks into a carriage, but precaution demanded they follow through with their threat. Eleanor handed Jackson the evidence from her locket, and together they composed a detailed letter to the Denver Tribune, explaining the connection between Judge Harrington and Maxwell Blackwood, the embezzlement that had led to 12 deaths, and the attempted sabotage of Silver Creek Mine. Once this is published, Eleanor said, Blackwood will be finished. And Harrington with him, Jackson added with satisfaction. 2 days later, they watched Judge Harrington and Victoria board the eastbound train. The judge's face was set in a mask of cold fury, but he made no move against them, too aware of the documents ready to be published at the first sign of trouble. 1 week later, a telegram arrived from the Tribune's editor. Blackwood arrested, stop evidence, overwhelming stop, trial date set stop, thank you for story stop. The Silver Creek mine reopened, safer and more prosperous than before. Frank Sullivan recovered slowly but surely, taking on a supervisory role while he regained his strength. Jackson and Eleanor discovered the rich vein of silver Nathan had died trying to reach, the largest deposit found in Colorado that year. And on a crisp December morning, with snow frosting the distant mountains, Eleanor Wright became Eleanor Hayes in a simple ceremony at Silver Creek's small church. Sarah wept happy tears as the minister spoke of second chances and divine timing. As Jackson slipped a ring onto her finger, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she hadn't arrived too late after all. She had arrived exactly when she needed to, not for Nathan Cooper, but for the life she was meant to find. Spring returned to the prairie, bringing new green to the endless rolling hills. Eleanor stood on the porch of the house she and Jackson had built, one hand resting on her swelling belly where their first child grew. In the distance, the Silver Creek mine operated at full capacity, its silver helping to build the future they'd both once thought lost. From the newspapers, they learned that Maxwell Blackwood had been convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison for embezzlement and criminal negligence leading to death. Judge Harrington had been named as an accomplice, but had fled to Mexico to avoid prosecution. "Any regrets?" Jackson asked, coming to stand beside her, his hand finding hers. Eleanor shook her head, watching the sunset paint the land in gold and crimson. "Not one. Every step of the journey led here, even the painful ones." "Even arriving a day late?" he teased gently. She turned to him with a smile that held all the certainty in her heart. "I wasn't late at all. I was right on time." The end.